Hello friends, this is Prashant here from Indian Blockchain Institute. Today's topic is why enterprises and companies need blockchain. It is asking simply why would you need internet, right? We need internet to connect each other. We need internet to move information from one location to another location. Internet has created a world of tremendous opportunities. We could imagine a world without internet, but can we actually live without it? The answer is impossible. The answer is absolutely no. Similarly, what we use is actually internet of information. We are in web 2.0. We need blockchain to move from internet of information to internet of value, which is web 3.0. The problem with today's internet is that whatever data we generate or whatever information we generate, right, we actually don't own it. All this information is maybe owned by some trusted third parties or centralized bodies. For example, whenever we do transactions, the data is stored with one particular bank, right? But now imagine a scenario where your transactions has to be used by another bank, maybe for loan purposes, or maybe identifying your credit record or things like that. So in this current scenario, this bank actually have to share your data to another organization or to another entity without you being authorizing it, meaning the data is purely owned by the bank. And obviously, as a bank or as a business, right, I wouldn't want to share my any confidential information, because information related to the customers is not only confidential, but it also determines or shares my confidential data related to the business, right? But with blockchain, there is an audit trail of records. I can connect, organizations with organizations, and similarly multiple organizations and multiple stakeholders onto a one common ecosystem or onto a one common platform. And I can, establish trust, or I can verify transactions or data by without actually being sharing it, using smart contracts, using data-driven decision making. That's what the power of blockchain is. So now imagine, right? For example, in a similar scenario where a money has to move from a person A to a person B, and there is multiple stakeholders and multiple banks are involved. So whenever a money has to move from one location to another location, a person would actually initiate a transaction with a bank, and that bank in exchange would initiate or pass the same information to another receiver's bank, maybe in New York using SWIFT, or maybe some custodian, or maybe some other third parties. And finally the money is moved. In this entire transaction, there are multiple stakeholders and multiple participants involved, and all these participants currently work in silos, meaning though they are connected with each other using internet, but at a database level or at an information level, they are not connected with each other. That's why they rely on trusted third parties like SWIFT, for example. Right. But again, I'm relying on SWIFT without actually verifying my data, meaning any bank could pass any information on that SWIFT network, and other participants are actually forced to accept it. For example, I might want to move, let's say $100 million. So whenever I want to move actually $100 million, a role of a bank is to check my balance whether I have $100 million or not. Right. And this information has to be passed, or a message is passed using SWIFT. Now we have seen cases where people are able to commit certain kinds of frauds by generating fake letter of credits or by generating any such information. One of the biggest example was latest frauds of Nirav Modi in India, where he was actually able to generate fake letter of records along with the support of some employees at the bank. Now the question is, were they able to verify this record? The answer was actually no. They were just forced to accept it because this was coming from a trusted third party or a trusted source. Now, if this same thing is on the blockchain, I could actually go at a very fundamental level and could go at an audit trail of these records and verify whether this information is true or false, whether there is balance exist or not, whether this transaction is approved and authorized by the bank itself or not. And then since all these organizations are currently working in silos, with blockchain, I'm actually connecting all of them to one and another to create a trusted business network. This business network again has certain rules and regulations which we actually call it consensus. Now, consensus are rules and regulations or the parameters on which this entire business network should operate, or I would say perhaps the rules and regulations of operating a business network or a constitution. Right. Now, any transactions or any information could not pass this business network, by bypassing this consensus. So now blockchain would offer a business network, a consensus, and this is all determined smartly, purely by data. As everybody believes that data is the new oil. And whenever we are sharing data, we are not sharing data, actually in an secured or an encrypted environment. Our data is actually exposed to lot of unauthorized use by third parties, right? Now with smart contracts, right, I'm kind of using the data to execute my transactions smartly. So for example, in this payment transaction, I could have various parameters put, such as, for example, if there is, the transaction should happen if a person has a valid balance. A transaction should happen if a person has a valid letter of credit. A transaction should happen if there is a valid collateral. Now all these participants across a network would actually see and verify at every point in time, whether all these parameters are met or not. And these smart contracts are actually not controlled by some one entity in a business network. It is actually governed and controlled by all the participants in a business network, right? That's what we call it consensus. So consensus is put into these smart contracts to kind of execute the transactions, or to basically govern whether the transactions are right or wrong without relying or depending upon some third party agencies. So with smart contracts, my entire process not only becomes automated but becomes more trusted, because I don't have to rely my trust on some third party person to execute the transactions. Like the fraud which I spoke about, the Nirav Modi fraud, which was a letter of credit, there actually a bank's employee was involved in the fraud. Now if you had a blockchain there, it could have been prevented, because you're purely relying on computer codes. Now, what blockchain offers to all the enterprises and business in terms of adoption is highest level of security. It's decentralized architecture, and by default hashing whenever a transaction should happen, right, it actually goes in an encrypted format into a network, meaning only the participants who have actually have the access control over that particular transaction can actually view or verify the transactions or the record. And also, most importantly, one could actually verify these transactions without actually having to share it, by purely using data computing on the blockchain network. So this is also offering not only highest level of security in terms of encryption and highest level of data privacy, but at the same time this is also providing decentralization. By decentralization, what I exactly mean is that, for example, as I mentioned you, that the data whatever we generate is controlled by some centralized bodies or centralized entities. Now whenever these entities goes down, for example, in this entire transaction, if a bank A is not working or a bank A is down, which means my transaction cannot happen anymore because there is no body to process my transaction. But if the environment is decentralized, right, every participant across a blockchain ecosystem is actually sharing and storing the same copy of a data or a same copy of a truth, which is in an encrypted format. Think this of like a magical book of records, which is purely encrypted, and the respective owners can actually see or modify the data. But this magic book is kept with everyone, right? So let's say even if a participant or a bank A is down, I can still able to kind of initiate a transaction and verify it, because all the other participants in an ecosystem is sharing the same copy of a data. So they could use the same copy of a data to verify all the information which is put into the smart contracts in order to execute a transaction, and therefore providing highest level of decentralization. Number two, also security. In lots of instances, we have seen a lot of instances of hacks which is happening, and the ransomware attacks and the hacks and all these things are on the rise. And actually people and even the fortune companies are actually facing these hack challenges and attacks, where they are kind of losing their data. So once the data is lost, primarily in a business network, meaning you have lost everything. You don't have a record anymore. But with blockchain, right, I'm avoiding a single point of failure. Since everybody's, kind of storing and sharing the same book of record, right, I could just put in my private keys and I could just retrieve my data back immediately in real time, even if I lost it. So meaning it is actually guaranteeing, 100% uptime network, right? And also it is avoiding single point of failure. And most importantly, for any enterprise, right, to move towards adoption of blockchain, one of the key challenges is that, though they use, you might think that, okay, I can use ERPs, I can use, other systems and other platforms to do the same. Now, the key challenge is, how do I establish trust in terms of data? For businesses today, everything is all about data, right? And if I use, ERPs, right? The thing is, how would I connect multiple ERPs, or how would I solve a problem of interoperability among these ERPs in terms of, sharing the data, in terms of doing transactions using these data, right? Which means I'm kind of exposing my database to third parties, and whenever these guys would modify or do any of the transactions or any of the references, I kind of actually don't know what's happening, because they are actually modifying it at my database level and there is no audit trail of it, right? To avoid all of these problems, right, with blockchain, I can connect organizations with organizations seamlessly onto one single ecosystem or onto one single environment, which is providing me interoperability in terms of businesses, or in terms of the entire business network. And for all these reasons, right, going forward, blockchains is the answer. It is not only providing highest level of data security, privacy and trust, but also it is helping to automate the entire business processes, automate the entire business transactions. And blockchain is obviously a very complex technology, and it's not easy to implement as it is said, because you have to create nodes, you have to create a right network architecture, and then you have to bring all the organizations onto one common ecosystem, and things like that, so on and so forth, right? Hence, at IBI, right, we really want to make things very simple. We want to make sure that everybody is learning the right way of doing the things, and that entire course is designed from our experience at Snapper Future Tech. So Snapper Future Tech is one of the India's most awarded enterprise blockchain company. We have not only created blockchain platforms in working across supply chains or working across banking, but we have also working across defense and a lot of other key critical areas where we understand the importance of data, where we understand the importance of business, and also where we understand the importance of security. So keeping all these things in mind, and all our experiences at Snapper, right, we have designed this course. This course purely comes from our experiences. This course purely comes from our failures which we have experienced at Snapper. And thus at IBI, we are the only institute or an organization which is actually backed by an enterprise blockchain company. And we want to make sure that we create right level of professionals by imparting right level of skill set and experiences whenever you join at our program. So thank you so much. Think blockchain, think IBI, and have a good day. I would be looking forward for your feedbacks. You could provide your feedbacks at a comment below, and we would be glad to answer. So keep liking our videos, keep sharing it, and let's spread the blockchain revolution and technology of trust. Thank you very much and have a good day.